Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. We're a minute past the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our event story from the front lines of local government attacks on press freedom. My name is Caitlin Bogus, and I am a senior advisor for advocacy at Freedom of the Press Foundation, and we're very excited to have you with us today for this important conversation. Freedom of the Press Foundation is a nonprofit that protects, defends, and empowers public interest journalism. And one of the things we do that's very important is we advocate in defense of the press and the public's right to know, including and especially when local journalists are attacked by government officials. In addition, we also build tools that help journalists and sources communicate securely, and we teach journalists how to keep themselves safe in the digital age. And our US Press Freedom Tracker also monitors and documents virtually every press freedom violation in the United States, like the ones that we're going to discuss at today's event. So again, today's topic is stories from the front lines of local government attacks on press freedom. And we have two fantastic speakers with us. First, we have Emmerich Meyer. Emmerich is the publisher of the Marion County Record, a community newspaper in Kansas that was raided by local police in 2023. And then we also have Wyatt Emmerich. Wyatt is the president of Emmerich Newspapers, which owns the Clarksdale Press Register, a community newspaper in Mississippi. And in February, a local judge issued an unconstitutional order requiring the Press Register to take down an editorial. So we're going to talk about both of those cases today. We were hoping to have Dawn Fletcher with us. Dawn is a reporter for the Atmore News who was arrested on bogus felony charges based on his reporting about an ongoing grand jury investigation last fall. But unfortunately, Dawn hasn't been able to join us today. But I think we're still going to have a fantastic conversation with Emmerich and Wyatt. At the end of the hour, we are going to save time for audience questions. And so if you have a question that you would like to ask the panelists, please feel free to use the Q&A function in the Zoom webinar or put it in the chat if you have access to the chat, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the hour. But for now, I wanted to just kick it off by starting with Wyatt. As I mentioned when I introduced you last month, the newspaper, the Clarksdale Press Register, was ordered to take down an editorial. And so maybe you could just tell us a little bit what the editorial was about and how did this unconstitutional order come to be?
Uh, yeah, so we the city wanted to raise taxes, and initially the tax was to go to the police and firefighters, and so it was uh, popular and supported. And then the city council decided to broaden it to include economic development projects. But the meeting to change that was not very transparent. They failed to follow the public notice requirement in Mississippi state law and alert the media to the meeting. And we wrote an editorial criticizing, first of all, the city council changing the nature of the tax bill, and then second of all, to criticized the city council for being secretive and not transparent. And the city council uh, admitted that they did not properly notify the newspaper and other media outlets, but they said it was an innocent mistake, that the clerk was busy and forgot, and claimed that the article was libelous, and then went to Jackson, about 2.5 hours away, and found a chancery judge to issue a restraining order. And we got a restraining order to take down the editorial.
So 2.5 hours away, that seems a bit unusual, no, to go that far to get a restraining order to take down an editorial.
Yeah, I think it had to do with the attorney they hired and that attorney's relationship with the judge. It was a conducive place for them to get a TRO, and the parent company is headquartered in Jackson, and I think that was their legal reasoning for doing that. But state law says you have to file it in the city where it was published. So there were a lot of issues with the whole case. Any rate, it got picked up on Twitter and went viral, and we got a huge response nationally, an outrage, which was very encouraging. And a few days later, the city council rescinded their lawsuit or their TRO, and that's where we are now.
And were you surprised when you initially learned about the lawsuit and the TRO? I mean, when you were describing the editorial, it reminded me that it was just recently Sunshine Week, and newspapers all over the country were publishing editorials just like that, talking about government transparency and why it's so important. So it seems like a strange thing to spark a libel lawsuit, let alone a censorship order requiring you to take down the editorial. So what was your reaction when you first found out about the order?
Yeah, I mean, it was really kind of shocking. And I mean, the city attorney called me and he wanted a retraction. And so we had discussions and we texted back and forth. And, I read the editorial. I said, this is opinion and there's nothing factually wrong. There's nothing to retract. And, I said, if you want, if you, rather than you file a lawsuit, we'll publish a clarification and state that you're claiming it was an innocent mistake. Never heard back from the attorney, and they ended up filing a lawsuit. So that was that.
Wow. I noticed in some news reporting about your case that you told some reporters that you also thought that the lawsuit may have been the result of kind of a feud between the press register and the mayor, Chuck Espy. Uh, can you talk a little bit more about that and your theory around the feud and how else maybe local officials had gone after the press register?
Well, we have covered the city council pretty vigilantly. The publisher there is a good old school publisher, and um, they raised their salaries something like 30 or 40%, and we reported on that, and that was not much appreciated. They now have some of the highest salaries around, and so that sort of angered the council, and we've kept up our reporting. I mean, really nothing more than just basic reporting the news, and sometimes they don't like the news. Like they hate the fact that we cover murders, and but I mean, you have to cover murders in a small community, and it's just you get the feeling like the mayor expects the publisher of the paper to be his employee and his PR arm. Well, that's not really the way we see the role of the newspaper. So there was sort of a difference between how the mayor thought the publisher should do his job and the way we thought the publisher should do his job, and it ended up in them, bullying us with this lawsuit.
Yeah, Eric, I want to bring you in. I saw you nodding your head a bit as Wyatt was speaking. You've had your own run-ins, of course, with local officials, to put it mildly. The case with the Marion County Record is probably one of the most well-known attacks on press freedom in recent years. But for anyone who's not familiar with what happened there, can you tell the audience about what happened at the Record?
Well, as Wyatt said, we'd had a contentious relationship based largely on the fact that we had the audacity to actually report news and report it in a way that was not positive and uplifting to the city in every way, shape, and form. And so this had continued on for some time, and it also involved another situation where they were trying to sneak through a bond election that they said, oh, we're going to do a charter ordinance, and oh, by the way, it'll take away your right to vote on bond issues. But they ignored that, and it built up for a while, and eventually we got raided because we'd been given a document that we tried to verify, and then decided we weren't going to use, and also told them that we got it, told them that we verified it, told them we weren't going to use it, and they decided to raid our office, searched our office. They did it in an overwhelming fashion. They were so proud of the fact it was the biggest raid in the history of Marion County. Among other things, they sent 7 police officers to my 98-year-old mother's home, and they stood there for 2.5 hours searching around for various things. She died the next day of the stress because of this. it was later, almost immediately, uh, that noted that that was improper to raid newsrooms. We found out that the people who wrote the search warrant application were both aware of it, that it was improper. They also were both aware that we could have obtained the document legally, but yet they wrote a search warrant that ignored those facts. And it got approved, again, venue shopping by a magistrate judge from a different county. The local district judge from this county refused to look at it, but it went to a magistrate judge and they got it through, and rated us and kept all of our equipment, all of our computers, including the one I'm talking on right now, for about a week before they returned them to us. So we had to put out the paper without computers.
And yeah, can I ask you about that aftermath? I mean, and first you, Eric, but then also you, Wyatt, as you're in the midst of these attacks, how is it impacting kind of the day-to-day operations of the news outlet?
Well, immediately it was 2 all-nighters to put out the paper because we lost everything. They took our backup drives. We didn't even have our nameplate. We had to find a nameplate from somewhere. But on and on, it has been testy. We've had incredible outpouring of support nationwide. Locally, it has only recently sort of come up, partly because people are afraid. They'd come up in the grocery store and whisper to you, "I'm really supporting you." They didn't want to be heard out loud as doing it because they can see if you cross certain powerful people, they have ways to get back at you. And they might not have the support structure of groups like yours, Caitlin, or other media operations, or just the public in general to rally behind them. It might be, there are no locally owned gas stations, but if you ran a local gas station and you dared to speak out against the mayor, all of a sudden everybody would be afraid to come buy gas from you, for fear the mayor would react to it. So people within the city limits, and it's kind of interesting that once you step 1 foot outside the city limits, it changed. It's getting better now, but it has been very stressful. We still have people who have boycotted us in advertising because of this, and we're struggling through that. But it's kind of weird just being in a town where that the guy who rifled through a reporter's desk and gathered information unrelated to the search warrant about an investigation we had of the police chief is now the interim chief of police. We have to deal with him regularly. The sheriff who worked on the search warrant is still the sheriff. We have to deal with him regularly. Fortunately, the magistrate judge has been transferred so that she never hears cases from this county anymore. But otherwise, we still are dealing with a lot of the same people, and it has been very stressful. It's one of the reasons one of our reporters quit. It took us about a year to find a replacement for her, and we're happy with the guy who has replaced her. But that time when we ran very short was very stressful for us. I mean, none of us in the whole office have had vacation times since the raid.
Yeah, I can believe it, I'm sure. Wyatt, what was the reaction in your community after the order was issued to take down the editorial?
I think it was positive and supportive of us. And it was distracting. I mean, when you're having to deal with a lawsuit, it impairs your ability to work. The publisher, Floyd Ingram, was very distressed personally about it. He feared for his safety. And it's traumatic. And it's a form of bullying using the public power and the public apparatus to intimidate. And it's very dangerous. And I'm, really as shocked as everyone else in the nation that this would occur. Especially in the nature they got the restraining order with us even being notified of the hearing. So not only were we not there to represent our side of the case, we weren't even notified of it. The Chancery Court judge, who is not even supposed to be hearing libel cases, ruled that we had malice which I don't know how in the world she could make that determination without even hearing from us. I mean, it was a kangaroo court, and it was a restraining order, which is highly unusual in the media, almost unheard of. There's so many problems with the case. A city cannot be defamed. A governmental entity cannot be defamed. So that was a fundamental flaw in the case as well. There's a lot of, nutty aspects to this case. And, fortunately, we were able to get representation for free from people supporting us. And otherwise, it would have been very expensive too. So it's a form of intimidation, bullying, hurting you, driving your cost up, and I guess the most unusual thing about our case, it was an editorial. It wasn't a news story. It was clearly opinion, and there weren't any factual inaccuracies. So it was just I've never seen anything like it, quite frankly, which is why we got such a response nationwide, such an outrage.
Yeah, totally constitutionally protected speech in in every way from start to finish. You said something that surprised me just now. You said the publisher was actually afraid for his safety when this was going on. And I don't want to ask you to reveal anything too sensitive, but it sounds like then it was a quite hostile environment. Was that the case? There were maybe threats or just reason to be concerned for people's actual safety?
Well, the mayor on his Facebook page, I mean, would regularly go on tirades about our newspaper and, how we were the devil and, how horrible we were. And he just feared that, some, crazy people in the community
Or
would, would take it to heart and try to, you know, uh, take action in some way. It was just, fearful.
yeah, sorry about that. I had a little interruption there. Um, uh, Another thing, Wyatt, I wanted to ask you about was something Eric said, which is that, after these incidents happen, you have to go on covering this community and you have to go on working with the very officials who may have attacked your news outlet. So in Eric's case, it's been a while since the raid on the Marion County Record, and so maybe there's been more time for that to play out. For your case, it's been very recent, but how has it been? You were vindicated, the order was lifted. How has it been since then, having to go on and cover all of these public officials?
Well, for a long time, they forced our publisher to sit in the very back of the city council room, uh, which was a form of intimidation. And my publisher wanted me to do something about it. I didn't know what you could do about that. Yeah, I mean, it's let me say this, that my company publishes 25 or so newspapers around Mississippi in little towns and counties. And almost all of the public officials appreciate the press, work with us in a collegial way, and understand the importance of a free press in the United States. But this was just a case in which you had a mayor who kind of ruled the council, with the iron fist and whipped up the public and fellow council members to think our newspaper was the devil incarnate, just for reporting on murders and crimes and secret tax increases and one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. I mean, it was very disappointing to see this happen, but it does happen. And what was encouraging to me was the overwhelming response from various organizations and the news coverage, and and I warned them. I said, this is going to blow up in your face. Don't do this. This is just stupid. and they did it anyway, and it blew up in their face and embarrassed them and embarrassed the city council. And they, 4 days later or 5 days later, they rescinded it.
Yeah, Eric, there was also an overwhelming response to the case of the record. Do you think that kind of national attention was what turned the tide when it came to your case?
Oh, absolutely. And the similarities between what Wyatt's talking about and what happened to us are just overwhelming. The little microaggressions that go along with this, the offenses of this. Um, I warned when they were raiding our office, I said, this is going to be on the front page of the New York Times. And they laughed at me. It was on the front page of the New York Times. But we'd gone along. This is pure out and out, as Wyatt said, bullying. I posted it on the wall in my office, a note that our mayor posted on Facebook about 5 days before the raid, which says the real villain. It also reveals a lot about his political character. The real villains in America aren't black people, they aren't white people, they aren't Asians, they aren't Latinos, they aren't women, they aren't gays. They're the radical journalists, teachers, and professors who do nothing but sow division among the American people. Well, it's a retired professor and a journalist. I kind of get tarred with that, on and on. But the sense of certain people, and it is not every official in every town, but there are officials probably in every circulation area in this country who fall into this category, who have now decided that they are in charge and no one dares question them. Part of the thing about it is that they can control so much communication now. They can get into the echo chambers of social media and make their message. They want to be in total control of the message. A lot of institutions have always tried to be in total control of the message. Schools are always big on this. They want to control everything that comes out about their school. But now they think that there's something new that goes beyond this sort of, I'm entitled. I can do anything I want. I've been elected. I've got the power. A lot of people think this is trickle down effects from the White House. I think it's actually a trickle up effect that has gotten to the White House. People are wanting to assert control over everything. And we, as an institution that really is charged with presenting the views that aren't the most popular necessarily, presenting the facts at all that are questioning something that goes on, get targeted. They also hate us because they hate all the people who are on cable TV late at night pretending to be journalists, but who are nothing but opinion spinners. But this notion of, there's a new notion at work in the United States, which is anything's legal until somebody challenges it in court. And not only have we been victimized by courts, we are learning that, what happens to the organization or the individual who doesn't have the money to challenge something in court? The notion of open meetings violations. I've got a letter here that I just saw on my copy stand next to me that is a letter from the state of Kansas Attorney General saying, your Open Meetings Act complaint against the city of Marion remains under review by this office. We got it a couple of days ago. The complaint was issued in April of 23. This has been ongoing for 2.5 years, 2.25 years. We just don't have an enforcement structure. There's a sense that journalists are weak. They've looked at all this, legacy media is falling apart. Now's the time we can attack them. And in some regards, a lot of people, Wyatt's organization has had the courage to stand by it, but there are a lot of organizations that don't. One of the things that has, I think, helped in our case is this isn't my financial future. I don't take salary. I'm a retired journalism professor. Should never say this. I get plenty of money from my pensions and all the rest of this. I don't need any money from here. I'm working here because I like working here, which means there isn't a whole lot they can do to me. They can't really, take away my if they cancel their ads, well, yeah, it makes it a little harder to make the ends meet around here, but it's not taking food off my table. And for the places that are trying to run an operation that their livelihood depends on the profitability of their publication, this is a pretty heavy club to hold over their head. And they just don't want people questioning them. My favorite comment, we had a shouting session just a couple of weeks ago at a city council meeting, and one of the city council members yelled at us and left the room, then came back into the room and he shouted at us, "All you ever do is ask questions." I'm like, yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. But like, we're supposed to just accept whatever they say as if it's correct, and then be the mouthpiece for it. So we're supposed to be Facebook, and they own our channel. And yeah, we can make a little stupid comment somewhere, but somebody will shout us down. Um, I really blame a lot of this on not any movement that was started nationally, but on the echo chambers of social media.
Yeah, that's interesting. You both have mentioned finances as being a real concern here, and the very reality that when small papers get hit with these kind of attacks, that one of the big concerns is how are we going to pay for defending ourselves? How are we going to pay to fight back? And Wyatt, I know you mentioned you were able to have pro bono counsel help you in this instance, but I'm wondering more broadly how you think about that at your paper. One trend that we've been tracking at Freedom of the Press Foundation are SLAPP lawsuits that get filed across the country against journalists. These are lawsuits that are totally frivolous based on journalist speech. They're often defamation cases, but sometimes they're more creative pleadings, and they're really not meant to be won. They're just meant to slowly siphon away money from the news organization as it has to defend itself. And they can be really problematic for small papers and have even led to the closure of some small community newspapers. And so Wyatt, I'm wondering, in this case, the libel case was dismissed very quickly, but if you were hit with a case that dragged on and on and on, would that be a big financial concern for your news outlet?
Yeah, it could kill the paper for sure. And you got to look at this in the context of the fact that we've lost, I think, a third of our newspapers. Newspapers are financially distressed, and it all has to do with the rise of big tech and the monopolies of Google and Facebook, their control of digital advertising, and it's that's all underlying the situation. Newspapers are weak financially, and so that weakness, it's like blood in the water, and to powerful politicians who want to dominate, and it's a real problem. And I mean, Emmerich Newspapers is a class representative in the antitrust lawsuit against Google, and I mean, we're fighting this, and that's a ways off. But we have the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act, which had made a lot of progress in the Senate, but now with the Republicans in control, it's pretty much dead in the water, even though it's a bipartisan bill. Probably there are 2 Democratic names on it for every 1 Republican name on the sponsor list, and it's perceived as a Democratic bill. And we all know Trump wants to jail journalists or something like that. So, I mean, yeah, it's all part of the same syndrome of the decline of real journalism in this country. We've lost, I think, more than half of our professional journalists. Instead, you just have people posting to Facebook, which is not real journalism. You wouldn't ask your carpenter to perform brain surgery on you, but we're perfectly happy to let people post on Facebook and consider that news and accuracy. It's not. That's why we have journalism schools where you go and you learn the craft of journalism. And it's really, really sad. And yes, these lawsuits will put newspapers out of business. There's no doubt about it. We had several offers to defend us pro se by nonprofits that are dedicated to defending the press and speech. And so, I'm hoping those organizations continue to grow strong and can battle back.
Yeah, and you mentioned, around legislation for funding of the news media, there's also the Community and Small Business Support Act, which is around giving tax credits for hiring local
Right.
journalists. A promising proposal. And some states have enacted things like that. But like you said, the precarious financial situation is like blood in the water. That was very evocative, what you said. I want to remind folks, we're about halfway through, that we are going to take questions at the end of the session from the audience. So if you have questions for Eric and Meyer, please, excuse me, for Eric and Wyatt, please use the Q&A function on the Zoom chat, and we'll get to those at the end. But Eric, I wanted to ask you about a step you took after the raid, which was you actually filed a lawsuit challenging what had happened to you, and trying to get some measure of justice for what happened to you and to your mother and to the record. Can you talk a little bit about that lawsuit and what you're hoping it might achieve?
Yeah, we actually filed several suits. The newspaper, I personally, my mother's estate, two of our reporters, one former reporter, our office manager, and the vice mayor of Marion, who was also raided at the same time because she was supposedly our deep throat on this, even though she wasn't, and everyone knew that. All filed federal suits. We were lucky. Wyatt mentioned we had a First Amendment restraint provision in our libel insurance policy that covered some of our initial costs. We had a 20% deductible, which a journalism organization put in on that. We're currently also suing on an open records request to get the communication that went on between city officials prior to the raid, which we are doing. I'm not quite sure what happens if we lose that and who pays the legal bills for it. We haven't thought about that at this point. But the other suits are all done on a contingency basis, obviously. So we are suing for violation of the First and Fourth Amendments. We're suing the sheriff, the county, the city, the former police chief, and several other people who are involved in it. This is the longest process you've ever imagined in your life. It goes on and on and on. The city has an insurance company that is defending it, and the entire strategy, we've actually learned this confidentially from a city council member who was told this in an executive session, that the entire strategy is to just rack up as much legal fees as they possibly can, and delay the thing as far as they can. So we don't anticipate any decision anytime anywhere soon about it, but we've got wrongful death suits that will come after this and some other things of that nature. So we're keeping the lawyers busy. We've got a good one, fortunately, which is something that people need to start thinking about. One of the big problems of the day we were raided was I wanted to call our state press association, has a hotline, and I have his numbers in my cell phone. It's on my computer. It's posted right there on the wall in my office, but they wouldn't allow me in my office, and they seized my computer and they seized my cell phone. So I had to go find his phone number for one thing to get all this started. That used to be when we had more media companies around, more companies like Wyatt's that are responsible companies. You could get nearby neighbors that would help you with this. Canada, I'm sorry to say, is not going to help you with it. I don't think Cherry Road's going to help you with it, and that's all the neighbors we've got anymore. The organizations that were out there were very supportive. The professional organizations were very supportive. Individuals were very supportive. We got so many subscriptions out of this that we're the 121st largest town in Marion, in Kansas, the 57th largest county. A year after the raid, we had the 8th largest paid circulation in the state, which overwhelmed our bookkeeping system, I might add. Our bookkeepers listening on the other room, trying to keep up with it. But we got a lot of contributions from that, and we've had just direct outright people sending us cash, people sending us gifts, people sending us whatever, and organizations that have helped us with legal problems as well. It still, though, just comes down to the fact that we probably need to understand that there is a role for journalism in society, and that role is not necessarily being the cheerleader for the town. We are here to present the views that aren't heard, to explore the facts that aren't explored. We just had a guy in here this morning who was talking about a meeting of the hospital board last night, at which they decided that they were not going to expand the election of the hospital board members. You have to show up between 5 and 5:15 on one afternoon to vote for them. And this is an entity that imposes a tax levy. And you have to go to their meeting room and show up on a particular day between 5 and 5:15, which is not the most convenient time for voters. Somebody wanted to expand the hours and they were just shouted down in the meeting. It's legal that they can put these positions on the ballot like any other taxing entity. They won't do that either. Because largely they've been able to control who's in charge of the board and who's in charge of things out there. They can bring their friends in, they can bring the employees in, and they can vote for whoever they want to do it. So it's sort of the inmates and their cronies running the asylum. And if we dare speak out about this, well, the hospital's now boycotting us for advertising. So it's that kind of thing that goes on. And I think it happens more than we know about, a lot more than we know about. We hear about Wyatt's case, we hear about my case, hear about other cases. Just going to speaking engagements around and having people coming up after me and telling me stories about things that happened to them that you've never heard about. Part of it's because people are afraid. They're afraid that they're going to have things taken away from them. And for all those wonderful pieces of legislation out there about supporting journalism, there's also huge moves to let's stop having legal publications in newspapers. Let's post them on city websites. Let's do that, which could devastate the economics of most small rural newspapers, particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Wyatt, I'm curious if you've faced any pushback from advertisers of the type that Eric is talking about, whether in regards to this incident or other coverage. Is that something that you worry about as a community newspaper?
Yes, the mayor organized a boycott against us, a year or two ago, because he didn't like our coverage. And kind of like Eric said, I mean, the mayor just really did not grow up. He's a younger mayor, just doesn't understand the traditional role of a newspaper. He just assumed that because he was mayor, the newspaper's job was to do what he told us to do, and we didn't do that. We did what we perceived as the traditional role of a newspaper, and to be a critic. Not always. I mean, the editorial that was taken down actually said that we supported the tax increase for the police and fire initially. We only changed our support when they broadened it to, a very vague economic development projects. So we try to support the community, but we also have to report things that need to be reported, like burglary sprees and things like that citizens need to be alert to. The mayor just didn't see that as our role and organized a boycott against us, and it did hurt us. We weathered that storm. We also got a lot of support, on the other hand. But I mean, the paper's marginally profitable. But putting out a little paper these days is really hard to do. And it doesn't take much to shut one down. And I suspect that there will be a lot of newspapers that are closed because of these SLAPP lawsuits and the cost of defending these SLAPP lawsuits. We don't have a SLAPP law in Mississippi, so that was one of the things that hurt us.
Yeah, something for advocates like Freedom of the Press Foundation to work on.
There's also a problem, if I might add, that young journalists see this. The kids in school, and I'm having taught recently, they recognize this. They're not going to come work for. I mean, so even if we survive, we have trouble recruiting talented people to work in our community. We were lucky to get a guy come here, partly because of the notoriety that we'd received, but just getting a normal, recent graduate to want to come to work. They don't want to be unpopular. And I can recall they've been poisoned in some regards. We interviewed kids when I was teaching at the University of Illinois why don't you want to be a journalism major? Why do you want to go into public relations? And the answer, the number one answer was, I want to go into public relations so I can tell the truth. People think journalists lie. This is, we got to get over that, or we're not going to have the next generation of people to do what Wyatt and I and other people are trying to do around here.
Yeah, so Wyatt, I mean, how do you think we make the case to the public that journalism is important, that press freedom is important, that reporters are trying to report the truth, that it matters to their communities? How do we convince people, and how do we do it in a bipartisan way? Because, you know, Eric mentioned that he doesn't think that Trump gets talked about a lot and like the trickle down effect, but he doesn't actually think that's what's happening. He thinks it's trickling up. And in your case, I think the mayor that was targeting your paper is a Democrat. So this is a bipartisan problem. So how do we get people back on the side of journalists and the press?
Well, I write about it all the time, and trying to just raise awareness through my weekly column. I've been writing for 35 years. I don't know. I don't know if there's a solution. Social media and the internet has so profoundly changed communications. I don't know if there is a path forward, quite frankly. We're trying. I'm trying. I mean, the tax credits and the royalty payments, you know, that's law in Canada, and you're seeing a resurgence of newspapers and local news websites in Canada. We don't have that in America, and we're atrophying. I don't know if there's a solution. It's very sad.
And what about how do we help journalists and publishers find the courage to stand up against these things? I think I saw it reported, for example, that someone from the city tried to lean on the paper to fire the publisher because of concerns about the reporting that the Register was doing, Wyatt. But that didn't happen. I mean, so how do we make sure that the people in the business have the backbone to stand up and fight back against attempts like that?
Yeah, the mayor offered me $30,000 to fire the editor, uh, which was
City
Wow.
money or his own money?
we never got that far because I said no, that's not the way it works. I'm not sure where the money was going to come from, but it just he wanted to operate in secrecy, and we were the fly in the ointment, you know, and he wanted to get rid of us as best he could.
We had our police chief offered to finance one of our reporters starting up a rival newspaper. So these things happen all over everywhere. But I like Wyatt, I've been writing trying to get people to do it. I think one of the fundamental things is people don't think they can change things. I've written the same editorial probably 50 out of the 52 weeks in the year, just with different ways of expressing it. But the importance of people taking an active role in government and believing that they can make a difference. And if you don't believe that you can make a difference in something, all you listen to are slogans. If you believe you can make a difference, you'll look at facts. Well, we're an industry that deals in facts, not slogans. And we don't want to have an electorate that worries about whether transgender abortion doctors are flooding across the border to stuff our ballot box and seize our guns. There are issues that we can actually talk about that you need to look at and look at the facts of them. And getting people to believe that they have a voice in this. The lack of that voice gives support to people who will just destroy. I mean, they don't care what they do. This is a lot of people have asked how do you come from Kansas? Kansas is this solid Republican county. They're going to be 100% for Donald Trump and whatever else. Why do they do that even though he doesn't do anything for this county? Because they just want him to see mess things up. Just somebody disturb things. They want to have a source of change, whatever it is. They don't care what it is, as long as somebody changes something. They don't believe they can do it themselves. So I kind of am pushing for the idea of a return to the old civic journalism and get people more involved and understand then perhaps the government could that there's a reason to listen to the citizens and there's a reason that they may bring things to the table and that let the citizens understand that if they do say something, they don't have to just, shout about it on Facebook or some other social media that they can actually influence the debate. Right now, I don't think anybody believes that they can influence the debate. It's happening without them, and that hurts newspapers, and it sure as hell hurts democracy.
I think certainly both of your papers are, trying to engage your communities and make them feel like they have a voice and they need the facts and they can make a difference if they are paying attention to what's going on. You've both talked about examples of how your reporting has shed light on city government, but then on the other hand, it's led to this kind of hostile reaction from government officials. So I guess I'm wondering if you were giving advice to other community newspapers out there who may be facing a similar dynamic where they're trying to just report straight, and that is getting extreme pushback from government officials who want to control the narrative. What advice would you give them? Should they be on alert for these types of attacks that happen to you? And what should they be doing in advance?
Well, I think that because there's so little good local journalism out there, that the influence of good local journalism is very powerful because people just don't get much of it. And so they believe all the PR that comes out of these government organizations. And they're shocked and dismayed when they realize through our reporting that it's not always just the way the city council says it, that there's, some stuff being swept under the rug. So because there's so little good local journalism, the good local journalism that is there tends to be very powerful and gets results. And unfortunately, one of those results is pushback from the city council in the form of intimidation tactics and such. As we talked about, when you factor the cost of defending lawsuits in the already very high cost of producing good original journalism, it just makes it cost prohibitive, and therein lies a huge financial problem. Because of Section 230 of the Communications Act, Google and Facebook and the platforms have legal immunity. We don't have legal immunity. We have to go buy libel insurance or risk, complete financial ruin in the event of a libel lawsuit. That's unbelievably unfair that the big platforms get a free pass and we don't. They're 100 times, 1,000 times richer than we are, yet they don't have to worry about libel. They can post anything they want to on their platforms and have immunity. That's just a horrible miscarriage of justice, which is one of the reasons journalism is suffering.
Yeah, and they can also then say that the justification for it was, well, we didn't edit this stuff, but now they're saying, oh, but yeah, we are editing this stuff. 230 is a ridiculous law, and Wyatt is absolutely right. Repeal that, and that would help us. But
Eric, I think I'm going to have to break in and say we're going to have to agree to disagree on that. And anyone who's interested should read more from Eric and Wyatt on this. But also, FPF takes a different position. We think 230 is an important protection for journalists, but absolutely agree that the press needs more protection from libel suits too. It's not fair, but the answer, I think, is to protect the press more. So we need anti-SLAPP laws in every state. We need those strong protections for the press. Totally agree on that. But that's a topic for a different panel. I want to ask you, Eric, before we go to audience questions, if you were giving advice to community papers that might be worried about a similar type of attack, what advice would you give them other than maybe have the phone number of your lawyer and your press association written down in case your computers get seized?
Well, I'll have to quote the great saying of Galaxy Quest: "Never give up, never surrender." Eventually, what Wyatt's saying is true. Eventually, people recognize, and we're starting to see this around here. They recognize that oh yeah, you were the ones who figured out that problem that affected me. When it doesn't affect them, they may still side with the mayor about it being positive, but eventually you keep it up long enough, people will come in and they will find out that there was this thing that they cared about, that you managed to expose something that was important that was being hidden. So if we stay with it long enough and figure out some way, I've got more journalists working for me here at this little weekly than any of the surrounding daily newspapers around me. I've got more journalists working for me than any of the two daily newspapers combined surrounding me. We have to do it. Now, we have to find a way to pay for it. That's a challenge. I think that quality will eventually drive people to pay for it. It's quality not only in journalism, but in advertising and everything we do. If we do it to the best of our ability, we can make it. We don't have to have. When I worked at the Milwaukee Journal, they would make announcements that we've achieved 28% profit on sales this year, but it was way short of our 35% goal. We don't need those kind of goals anymore. We need the goal of $1 over cost is fine. It's not going to attract any investors in the business, but it'll let people continue in the business. And realizing that if you stay the course, I think your support begins to pick up, and then you can deal with the bullies. And if the bullies come after you, there are other people who will come to help you. Just call out, make sure they understand it, and they will come. And you can survive it. Although I lost a reporter because she was afraid of being harassed by the police and others. Put up with it. It's going to require some courage. I mean, this journalism is a calling, and we're going to find a day that the people in it are there because it's a calling. Like drawn to the ministry, or drawn to the clergy, or drawn to education or social work or other things, other fields that don't pay well. But the people do it because they believe in it. And we need to get more people believing in it. One of the nice things really these days is, as a college professor, the people who really believed in it very often were students who came from minority backgrounds or had different socioeconomic traditions. It's the white bread suburban kid who doesn't necessarily go into journalism anymore. And maybe we need to get some incentives for that. Report for America is a good one, and others of that nature that we can try to cultivate, because this ultimately depends on us having good journalists do good work. And if we have better journalists, we will have better journalism, and better journalism will be the savior of journalism. The fact that we've contracted so many newspapers and that they've gone way down from what they used to be, and that they're just sort of treading water getting through, is what makes us vulnerable.
Yeah, yeah, well said. I do want to go to questions from the audience. And Eric, kind of your last comments go directly to one of the questions, which was, how do we actually recruit and sustain journalists with these issues that are facing the free press? And curious for your thoughts. I know you're a professor, but Wyatt, also, if you have thoughts on how you actually attract reporters to community newspapers these days, how do we do that?
You can make a difference. That's all you have to say, and then you have to show them. From the journalism school's perspective, give kids experiential learning that gives them an opportunity to make a difference. The decline of campus newspapers, they aren't getting this thrill. I mean, when I was editor of my campus newspaper, we got 2 people sent into prison because they'd stolen money from the university. They don't see that that's out there. And some of it is the fault of the education system and the fault of how we train. And now you've got to protect your brand, and you've got to do your social media marketing. You've got to do your this. No, let's create some compelling content and see that it has an influence on society. If you do that, you hook these kids. That's the narcotic that you want to get them hooked with.
Wyatt,
Yeah,
what do you think?
it's very difficult recruiting. Because in the old days, we were the powerful media, and now that's Google and Facebook, and kids grow up posting, and it just, they don't get it. But you got to find that different young person who really understands the traditions and the roles and the power of traditional media and professional journalism, and then give an opportunity to use that. And it's just very hard because it's a lot of work. Young people are not used to the kind of grind that is necessary to produce quality journalism. So that's a huge challenge in our industry. But when you find somebody like that, it's wonderful, and they make an amazing contribution. It's just there are not enough of them.
Yeah. We have another question in the Q&A. This one's to Eric, but I think actually maybe both could speak a little bit to it. It says, Eric, you said that people in the community were scared to show their support after the incident. Have sources been reluctant to speak to you for stories for fear of retaliation, and has that affected your ability to do your work? And I guess, Wyatt, for you, after Eric, we talked about the positive outpouring from the community, but have you felt kind of negative impacts that way on your work from knowing the mayor's gone after the Register? So Eric, why don't you?
Sources actually have become less reluctant to talk to us, more eager to talk to us, particularly if they want to remain anonymous sources, because they think we'll take them on. They I think admire the fact that we withstood a challenge, and they think we're strong enough to trust with their information. So we get all sorts of tips and things to check through, more than we ever did before.
It turns out having courage has a benefit when it comes to being a newspaper reporter.
Yeah, I think that's true. When you do good reporting, you're more likely to get people to call you and give you tips because they think it's not a waste of time.
Yeah, great. Well, we can end on that hopeful note, a reward for standing up for freedom of the press that helps you do more of that great community journalism that you were talking about. I'd like to thank you both so much for joining us. Really appreciate this important conversation. And I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for joining us as well. If anyone would like to learn more about Freedom of the Press Foundation or other press freedom issues, you can visit our website, which is freedom.press. You can also subscribe to our newsletters at freedom.press/newsletters. And if you would like to continue advocating for journalists like Eric and Wyatt and others across the country, we really need your help. And so I would ask that you consider donating to our work today by also visiting freedom.press/donate. And again, thank you so much, Eric and Wyatt, and thank you for the work you're doing every day. Community news is really so important in our country right now, and we're rooting for you at FPF, and we're here to help if this happens again, but I'm hoping that it won't. Maybe local officials learned their lesson. We'll see. But yeah, best of luck and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.